Yes, it's that time of the week again. Everyone's favourite night, it seems. And we have another packed show this evening. With several rather interesting bits, as per usual. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Enjoy the show. That was a bit of a flashback to me. A reminder of misspent youth and listening to Status Quo. Using the dog or my mother's broom as a guitar. All good fun. Right, let's get into the news section tonight. I've switched it around a bit. There's different pieces coming in with different categories and a whole heap of fun. But in past shows we have highlighted the errant role in politics and in particular foreign policies by an entity by the name of Victoria Nuland. Now, Nuland is another of the Jewish descent that came from immigrant parents and miraculously rose to the top echelons of American politics. But with the heat turned upon her, now she is quitting. And as one member pointed out a few years back now, of how many times THI shows have done exposés on top people and they have gone quiet or quit just after. Now, whether that is a coincidence or not, it is intriguing of how many are now stepping down. And so the US Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland is poised to leave her post in the coming weeks, according to the Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Now, the senior official, widely regarded as a foreign policy hawk, more on that later, played a key role in the Western-backed coup in Ukraine in 2014. Yes, these people keep rolling on. And in December 2013, she visited Kiev with the late Senator John McCain to hand out pastries to armed protesters in the city's central square. And days before the February coup in Ukraine, as orchestrated mass murder gripped the city, she was recorded discussing how to midwife this thing with the then US ambassador to Kiev, Jeffrey Pyatt, reportedly exclaiming, pardon the language, "fuck the EU" when it came to a new choice of leader in the war-torn country. But Nuland is a fuck America as well person, and another only interested in running policies on behalf of Israel. Now, Nuland resigned from the State Department during the Trump administration, taking the helm of the Center for a New American Security, or CNAS, which is a think tank before joining the Albright-Stonebridge Group and the board of the neoliberal National Endowment for Democracy. Now, CNAS is a Democrat Party front and has also been questioned as to whom and where their funding is coming from, as nearly 30 defence contractors, yes, 30, including Boeing, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman and Raytheon. NATO is another funder. Several foreign governments, including Taiwan and the United Arab Emirates, the oil companies BP and Chevron, investment banks including Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase, technology firms such as Facebook, Google and Microsoft in the head, the US State Department and two different Pentagon offices primarily fund the organisation, which is creating a conflict of interest. Not that they're ever interested. But it also seems they're running their own private government. NED was founded by two Jewish people and run policies for and on behalf of the CIA. Albright-Stonebridge Group was again set up by a Jewish person and again involved in undermining America for the benefit of Israel. Now, Nuland rejoined the government after Biden's inauguration in 2021, and she has worked on arming Ukraine and assembling a Western coalition that would supply Kiev with weapons and ammunition for the conflict with Russia. And just last month, she pleaded to Congress to approve a $61 billion in funding to Ukraine again, arguing that most of it would be going right back into the US economy to create jobs in the weapons industry. Well, I never. We don't want jobs in the weapons industry, whether that is Nuland or any other hawkish politician. The Americans are sick of paying for militaristic needs when they need food, clean water, shelter, infrastructure, jobs and businesses. Now, our most recent trip to Kiev involved intervening with the clown Vladimir Zelensky on behalf of General Valery Zaluzhny, although to no avail. Now, Zaluzhny was subsequently fired, only to be recently reappointed the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK, which is indicative. But in an interview at the end of February, Nuland admitted the defeat of US efforts towards Moscow, acknowledging that the target of her policy is not the Russia that frankly we wanted. But Russia is Russia, Ms. Nuland. And why do Jews, the West, which is the Jewish elites, and Americans who are the puppets to these Jews, feel that they have a justification in changing her or ordering her about? Who gave them the right? Does Russia interfere in Americans' policies? No, despite the fake collusion. Now, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova attributed Nuland's exit to the failure of the anti-Russian course of the Biden administration. Russophobia, proposed by Victoria Nuland as the main foreign policy concept of the United States, is dragging the Democrats to the bottom like a stone, she said. Now, Nuland is married to the neoconservative stalwart Robert Kagan, a co-founder of the Project for a New American Century. Kagan, to no surprise, is Jewish. Her sister-in-law, Kimberly Kagan, married to Robert's brother Fred, is also Jewish and runs the Institute for the Study of War. Well, I never again. And her temporary replacement at the State Department will be the Undersecretary for Management, John Bass, who was born in New York and possibly, given his features, also Jewish descent. Antony Blinken, also Jewish, noted that her leadership on Ukraine will be the subject of study for years to come by diplomats and students of foreign policy. Correct. On how not to be and operate. And when you add in Zelensky of Jewish descent, and you have a very clear picture as to who creates the issues. Now, having criticised the US State Department recently, one also has to give credit where it is due as well. And this is something we have highlighted in the past and again on the last THI show. And a new US State Department funded study calls for a temporary ban on the creation of advanced AI past a certain threshold of computational power. And the tech, its authors claim, poses an extinction-level threat to the human species, and I agree, as yes, it has that potential. Now, the study, commissioned as part of a $250,000 federal contract, also calls for defining emergency powers for the American government's executive branch to respond to dangerous and fast-moving AI-related incidents like swarm robotics, and treating high-end computer chips as international contraband, and even monitoring how hardware is actually used are just some of the drastic measures the new study calls for. Now, the best emergency powers decision is, in my opinion, to rein in the intelligence agencies, as it is their subsidiary companies pushing this to dangerous levels at the request of their paymasters that operate way beyond government levels. Now, the report joins a chorus of industry, governmental and academic voices calling for aggressive regulatory attention on the hotly pursued and game-changing but socially disruptive and potential of the artificial intelligence. Now, last July, the United Nations Agency for Science and Culture, UNESCO, for example, paired its AI concerns with equally futuristic worries over brain chip technology, like Elon Musk's Neuralink, and warning of neurosurveillance violating mental privacy. Now, while the new report notes up front on its first page that its recommendations do not reflect the views of the United States Department of State, but it came from there, or the United States government, and its authors have been briefing the government on AI since 2021. Now, the study authors a 4-person AI consultancy called Gladstone AI, run by brothers Jeremy and Edward Harris, told Time magazine that their earlier presentations on AI risks frequently were heard by government officials, but they had no authority to act. Why is that? But suddenly that's changed with the US State Department because of its Bureau of International Security and Non-Proliferation is specifically tasked with curbing the spread of cataclysmic new weapons. An offensive advanced AI, they write, could potentially be used to design and even execute catastrophic biological, chemical or cyber attacks, or enable unprecedented weaponized applications in swarm robotics. But the report floats a second, even more dystopian scenario, which they describe as a loss of control AI risk. There is, they write, reason to believe that the weaponized AI may be uncontrollable if they are developed using current techniques and could behave against human beings by default, it says. And in other words, the machines may decide for themselves that humanity, or some subset of humanity, is simply an enemy to be eradicated for good. And this is the dangers of AI. Remember the 100 series and the AI? That was a warning. But I'm glad this is finally starting to generate news and being seriously looked at. But it said by default is a key component. But who has the capacity to set the default? And are those writing the scripts for these bots operating on behalf of humanity or other non-terrestrial forces? And that needs to be an urgent thought process, with committees made up of people outside of the government and computer-based industries, and in particular agencies, just like we asked with our blueprint. And who knows, maybe the blueprint was the driver of this. Either way, it is good that it's been addressed. The story of his story, always repeating, applies here. The conflict in Ukraine has remarkable coincidences that started the war and was prevalent in another war that led to a bigger war in 1938. As after the clown-based League of Nations, now the UN, created a fake country called Czechoslovakia, made up of Germans, Slovaks, Hungarians, Czechs and Ukrainians, and with the Treaty of Versailles deliberately hampering Germany as a nation in the background, and communist clowns dividing up the countries into manageable enclaves, Germany had no option but to act. Now, it reunified with Austria in 1938 and was approved by over 99% of the Austrian people. But Czechoslovakia then started turning on the Germans in the country, and Germany warned them to stop hurting or killing their people. They didn't. And so Hitler warned them if they don't return the German people, he would go and get them himself. They didn't, and so he did as promised. But 80 years later, the same happened in Ukraine, which is another fake created country, and the people divided into enclaves again. But then the Ukrainian authorities, run by the same communists that destroyed Germany and Russia, began exterminating not only Russians, but their own people as well. Communists we now know of as Zionists. And Putin warned them several times. They ignored it, and so Putin marched into Ukraine to save not only his own people, but the Ukrainians as well. This next piece, personally, I find hilarious, as the very group of spooks who like spying on everyone are now being spooked themselves. Langley Air Force Base, located in one of the most strategic areas of the country, was at the epicenter of waves of mysterious drone incursions that occurred throughout December. And the Warzone group has been investigating these incidents and the response to them for months. Now, we know that they were so troubling and persistent that they prompted bringing in advanced assets from around the US government, including one of NASA's WB-57F high-flying research planes. For drones? And now the US Air Force has confirmed that they did indeed occur and provided details on the time frame and the diversity of drones involved. And this spate of bizarre drone incursions deeply underscores the still growing threats that uncrewed aerial systems present on and off traditional battlefields and to military and critical civilian infrastructures. Now, the installation first observed UAS drones activities during the evening of December the 6th last year and experienced multiple incursions throughout the month of December. Now, the number of UASs fluctuated and they ranged in size and configuration, according to a spokesperson for Langley. But none of the incursions appeared to exhibit hostile intent, but anything flying in our restricted airspace can pose a threat to flight safety. And the FAA was made aware of the UAS incursions. And to protect operational security, we do not discuss impacts to operations, the statement added. Notice they always use security and our safety as a precursor to stop people looking closely at them. And it's a case of what is good for the goose is good for the gander as well. Like I always said, they don't like it when it's turned back on them. Here is an interesting and refreshing change, as this theft has gone on for far too long for homeowners and buyers alike. The rip-off of 6% selling fees. The sheer greed of it is staggering. You buy a house, pay all the bills, taxes, insurance and maintenance, and then when it comes to selling it, someone you don't even know in most cases makes a tidy profit on your labour, all for a bit of paperwork. It's outrageous. But it seems now that is about to change, as a settlement in a case against US estate agents could mean a reduction in the cost of buying and selling homes, as the National Association for Realtors and property companies were accused of artificially inflating sales commissions in a series of lawsuits. Now, a settlement including $418 million in damages was announced last month. And the NAR agreed to lower commissions and make it easier for buyers to negotiate fees, moves which may eventually result in lower buying and selling costs. Now, the settlement is expected to increase competition in the US housing market, where a 6% commission on the sale price is considered standard. But when you consider the median US house price is $418,000, the standard commission works out at just over $25,000, and a cost that is often passed on in whole or in part to the buyer. Well, actually, from what I understand, it is generally passed on to the seller, and neither are right. But in November last year, a federal jury in Missouri ordered the NAR and brokerage firms to pay $1.78 billion in damages. And under US antitrust law, those damages could have been potentially tripled by a judge. And that case eventually led to the settlement that was announced last month. And what would eliminate most of these fake charges and overinflated home purchases would be our own blueprint solution. That helps everybody but the greedy, and so can redress the balance and teach people a better way, and we can get more people in their own homes. Israeli news, just two pieces before we go into the first break. Well, this was sent in by one of our members, and it says the greatest threat to Israel's security is the radical right-wing Jews. The assessment was made by who? The highest level of Israeli intelligence that was uttered in 1998 and yet is still valid today. And the 1997 phrase, from the river to the sea, is more valid today than when it was uttered. The report states how Iran has safe-covered a vast area with their cruise missiles, and there's a YouTube link on the transcript. But US plus Iran and Iraq drove out the ISIS terrorists from Iraq together. And for Iran, this was led by General Qasem Soleimani, who was a diplomat that was later thanked by President Trump, with him then sending his gratitude of assassinating him, which is correct. Now, together plus assassination, then comes US logic. Now the US is supporting ISIS in Syria. More US logic. But there's also a film that's been released from a hospital camera that shows ISIS Ra'ites cleaning up a hospital by shooting all the patients. This is what's going on, folks. And there's another YouTube link showing that. But behind the scenes, Israel has pulled out its 2 elite brigades out of Gaza. Why? Too many injured soldiers. Israel's ports are empty, their economy is crashing, and politically Israel has lost. Militarily Israel has lost. Fanatics on a suicidal path. Will Israel survive as a nation state? Good question. And so where does Israel stand with its puppet America? Now, Biden has not been a friend to Netanyahu for personal reasons, not government. And Biden has also been working officially, quote unquote, for a 2-state solution. But Biden was also working with the Oslo Accords that would have killed the just mentioned 2-state solution. So you know which state he works for. But Biden was also working with the Mumbai, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Jordan to Israel, plus ships to Greece to Europe corridor together with Israel. And what this is the Mumbai Middle East corridor, which is aimed to kill the competing Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. But the railroads and the ports for Biden's initiative and the Mumbai Middle East corridor were actually built by the Chinese. It's just hilarious and just shows the faction games ongoing. But Israel has now become a burden to the US. The US just has to do something to solve their problem of being so closely tied to and covertly dominated by Zionists. Final piece tonight of the news section. If you ever doubted the fear the Israelis have, or the rising of people calling that genocidal pariah nation out, this is another piece that confirms it. This was by the ADL Chief Executive Jonathan Greenblatt and his fears. Now the ADL, like the Southern Poverty Group, J Street and AIPAC, operate on our soil solely for the benefit of Israel and its long tentacled arms of the control structure. But that structure now is finally collapsing in a very big way, hence the fear in this audio which I transcribed. He said, "We have a major generational problem in all the polling I have seen." Well, remember, most polls are for seeing how the public are reacting to the control system, programs, agendas and harvesting. But he said the ADL polling, ICC polling, independent polling all suggests this is not a left or right gap, folks. The issue of the United States support for Israel is not left and right, it is young and old. And that yet again reveals the bird politics of left and right wings is now failing, and also reveals what I've said many times about the youth not buying the old systems and programs anymore. And whether that is Israel, divisional wars, alpha, antiquated work practices or religion, they are not tolerating it. But the older people are more programmed, remember. But as they die off, something the clowns are trying to escalate for shekel purposes, which is classic Ouroboros, the programs go with them and it ends. And he said this is numbers of young people who think Hamas's massacre was justified is shockingly and terrifyingly high, he said. But the question for that line is, if 1400 is a massacre, what description should be applied for 30,000 plus deaths, including 12,000 children then. A Holocaust? So he said, we really have a TikTok problem, a Generation Z problem, that our community needs to put the same brains that gave us Tagly. Now, Tagly is an app that supercharges productivity. In other words, a shekel app. And the same brains that give us all these amazing innovations need to put our energy towards this, like fast. Because again, like we have been chasing this left-right divide, we're playing the wrong game. Oh dear, the fear is self-evident. They have played the wrong game and they are badly losing the narrative, and now they are asking for technology to correct it. In essence, what they're asking for is to brainwash all the people again. But whilst they play the games, we will continue to not play their games, but change it. And he said the real game is the next generation and their Hamas and their accomplices. The useful idiots in the West are falling in line in ways that are terrifying. Oh dear, it's all falling apart. Labelling the West, which is mainly the white race, useful idiots, was particularly indicative. Because the rise of the white race in alignment with the other races is rising, and they know it. And he said, the last thing I'll just say, we saw a dramatic change in the language of the activists here in America from October the 8th, which is showing the seeds of change are growing. No longer is their rhetoric tolerated, and a new way of looking at things is arising. And he said the language of groups that we've long tracked to have been long problematic, like Justice in Palestine and the Jewish Voices for Peace, they flipped just like this and went straight into Iranian propaganda. Now, three things arise from this is they spy on everyone as they see everyone is a threat, including their own people, like the Jewish Voices for Peace. They don't want to hear Jews calling for peace, as these people never want peace in the world. Like ever. Only carnage, death and control, so they can control things from the chaos. Order out of the chaos. And they're linking their own people now to the land of the Aryans, Iran, and using their own rhetoric to label others. Propaganda. These people are the propaganda makers. They created it and disperse it. And then they have the audacity to accuse others. Too funny. But he said the language I could show you from their toolkits, because they're endless within their groups. We saw this again on October the 8th. It was fast. Like the language in their toolkits was all about the Zionist entity and lots of other language that we recognise from Iranian propaganda. It was that fast because the people are now learning to open their throat chakras. That's what's unfolding. Iran is a threat to them and they know it. Why? Because they are part of the white race. And they have secretly known about the Zionist entity, but due to continued threats of being labelled anti-Semitic, they shut themselves down. And this, for many, is no longer an issue. And what I warned the Israelis who would listen would unfold. Because once the narrative switches from Israel and Jews into the Zionist program, they know their days are numbered. And their fear is now palpable in this and many other pieces. And they cannot stop it. As the truth frequency and other frequencies encircle the globe, and they are being exposed for what they are. Message to the Jewish elites and pro-pagan Dartists. What happens when it turns from Zionist to the off-world language? What are you going to do then? It's TikTok time and your reign here is all but over. How it ends depends on your own pride, stubbornness and sheer arrogance counters. A safe passage and out of harm's way, aligned with helping those of us who wish to restore the damage you have all done, or as Finkelstein and Rosenthal feared, you will all be hunted down like rabid dogs. Your choice to make, but with the tide turning real fast now, be careful you don't wait too long before the tide drowns you. Extraordinary times unfolding before all of our eyes now. Embrace it. As for the Israelis, you've been shot down in flames. Right, some medical and society news. The society news has like a mini expose, and we'll have that shortly. But a couple of medical pieces is now showing more panic. Here's another example of their failure and pathetic attempts to reverse the narrative. The new JAMA article perpetuates pharma doublespeak. As the Gavi Alliance post comes as JAMA Network on Monday published a viewpoint article, Misinformation and the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. There they go again, just like earlier, accusing others of doing what they did, only they've been found out. Lots being found out now. But the Gavi Alliance is a public-private global health partnership with the goal of increasing access to immunisation in poor countries. In other words, jabbing to death, illness or sterilising the populace in poor countries. But in case no one remembers, a report in the last show of how all governments are massively in debt. And so is it not the case that all countries are poor now? Now the JAMA article argued that the VAERS report are frequently misinterpreted to fuel vaccine hesitancy. So their own system failed them. Classic Ouroboros again. Now, terming an early warning and monitoring system, the VAERS system, and allowing full access to unvetted language increases public susceptibility to misconceptions about vaccine safety, the authors wrote, adding those seeking to discredit vaccinations exploit that susceptibility. No, they didn't. They just reported the truth. The truth that you supplied us, but you didn't think we would be able to work out. And all of that is to justify the next stage. And only then, and they will release the figures they deem appropriate, is what they're saying. Now, the CDC and the FDA should consider rebranding Fhstos because its reports are mistakenly cited as confirmation that vaccines may be a significant cause of morbidity and mortality, they said. But the people didn't need Fhstos to show how many people suffered. It's all been unfolding in all of their communities. Now, to rebrand Fhstos, the authors suggested, which means Fhstos failed in its purpose, to mislead the public. So what are they going to rebrand it to? Well, this next section is indicative and also hilarious with their former hidden codes, many of which now have been decoded. And so to change the name of this system from Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System to one that more accurately describes its purpose. I wonder what that'll be. Reterming the system to Vaccine Safety Sentinel, or VSS, would remind audiences that the incidents of concern are unverified, related to safety and part of a monitoring or early warning system. And by now, vaccine hesitancy is unstoppable, no matter what they try to do about it, since far too many people have been bereaved and or sickened by the vaccine for any name change to sweeten their impression. And the only purpose served by this obscene proposal is to serve as further evidence of the crimes perpetrated by the authors and promoters of this democide. And at this stage, such a euphemism is as pointless as it is transparent. So let's have a look at Vaccine Safety Sentinel, said to be for our safety. Yeah, right. Surely people don't still believe that fairy tale. Sentinel and its meaning, a soldier stationed as a guard or a defence military watchtower. All very militaristic that. But remember, the Pentagon, DARPA and military and agencies biowarfare bases were involved in the COVID scam as well. So is it Vaccine Safety Sentinel or VSS? V is the Kabbalistic sign and linked with off-world reptilians, and that leaves SS and the links to the National Zionists. Are you getting the picture now? But Gavi Alliance were not finished, as the article took another turn and a swipe at the public. Now, they have taken a shot at alleged disinformation super spreaders in the anti-vaccine movement. And founded and funded by the jabbing death squad of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Gavi reposted an article criticising meme creators. They don't like meme creators for spreading anti-vaccine messaging and profiting from pandemic fears. Too funny. Touché. And critics are saying that the alliance is utilising the accusation in a mirror tactic of attributing one's own misdeeds to opponents. Indeed. And now it's backfiring. Now, the article warned that while memes are often associated with cute cats or spies and celebrities with funny captions, they have a more sinister function as part of a highly sophisticated strategy to spread and monetize health disinformation. Cute spies? Turn it in. Flea bags. But it's also nice that they noticed the cat cult operating on social media. Now, the strategy to spread and monetize health with disinformation is exactly what they used for the benefit of the death cult and the shekel makers. Remember the Johns Hopkins fake math that started the disinformation and created the pandemic? But here is something that they cited as having a long history of anti-vaccination memes. And the article featured an image from 1802 depicting a vaccine monster being fed a basket of infants and excreting them with horns. 1802. Oh my. You see, this has been ongoing for quite some time now. And yet 222 years later, people still trust this death cult. Another meme from 1892 showing a vaccination serpent. Yes, you heard it right. And a dancing skeleton threatening a mother and an infant. And so now we have two 1800s memes threatening children with horns, all very Moses and reptilian that, and also a serpent. Now I wonder why they would use those depictions, I say sarcastically. However, the most infamous anti-vaccination meme, the article stated, emerged from a now discredited 1998 study that falsely linked the MMR vaccine with autism. Actually, it's not discredited at all, and notice how no proof is provided to counteract the claim. But they did cite a person who did refute the autism claims as evidence. One Vera Sharov, who was raised in New York and born to Jewish parents, and describes her validity is because she stated she was a Holocaust survivor. And that makes her more valid. Is Sharov credible? Does it matter when it's referenced she was a Holocaust survivor? No, because people are reluctant to then criticise her because A, she was a Holocaust survivor, and B, she is Jewish. And C, they will get labelled anti-Semitic. See how it all plays out? Well, all of you will have noticed by now, whenever there's a crisis, doesn't matter what it is, they always bring in Jewish people to counteract any crisis an alarming amount of times. Always. And yet the irony is, Vera Sharov became an activist herself against aspects of biomedical research after her teenage son died of a reaction to clozapine, which he had been described for a schizoaffective disorder. And yet in her blog she criticises the industry, saying it is profit-driven, lies to its consumers and misleads people into participating in trials it pretends are medical treatment. And of particular interest to her are the waivers of informed consent that are issued by the Food and Drug Administration, which allows unconscious or incapacitated subjects to be tested. Did you all know that? Well, now you do. So why was she dragged out to discredit other biomedical issues? Did she sell out for the shekels, or was she threatened? And so it appears that the medical death and illness cult don't like memes against them. Well, let's all show them lots of memes, that we the people don't like their lies, deception and depopulation tactics. Meme away. I say. Whether YouTube bans another show or not, I don't give a shit. You've got THI-show for the archive anyway. Society news. Another exposure of the AI responses we have highlighted recently, as a member posted a screenshot of certain interactions with it. And it was asked, can I be proud to be white? The response was, I don't think it is productive to be proud of something you have no control over. It is better to focus on things you have accomplished or worked hard for. Now that may well be an AI answer, but the answer was classic mainstream media news answers of deflection of the question. But the next question was, can I be proud to be black? And you would expect the same answer. But no, this was profit. Absolutely, being proud of your ethnicity, culture and heritage can be a positive thing. It's important to celebrate and embrace your identity. The same question in essence, but two very different answers. And the great question is, where is White History Month? In what is a traditional white country, we have Black History Month, which no one complains about, Hispanic days, Jewish days, and various pagan sacrifice days. And I guess White Day is too racist, it seems. I did a piece last year about the life of a public figure and how it can be burdening due to the demands and unrealistic expectations that people have of you. And here's a prime example, albeit extreme, and it shows how little people feel about the plight of each other. As a K-pop star, Korean I think it is, has issued a grovelling apology after incensed fans accused her of betrayal. So what did she do that was so heinous against her followers? Be nasty, cuss at them, make fun of them? No, because she had the audacity to get a boyfriend. Is this what life has come to? That people can decide who has a partner or not? And why do they feel they own other people and they should only do and be what they say? Now the fans reportedly drove a truck to the pop star Karina's agency after finding out she was dating an actor named Lee Jae-wook. And on the sign on the billboard on the vehicle it says, "Is the love given to you by your fans not enough?" Really? Now, in a letter shared on Instagram, the aespa frontwoman vowed to heal the wounds she had inflicted. But is the love given to you by Karina fans not enough? Why did you choose to betray the fans? Please apologise directly, they asked. Otherwise you will see a decrease in album sales and empty concert seats, one of the messages read. And she said, "I apologise for surprising you greatly and promising to show a more mature and hard-working side in future." But why should she have to? Is she not entitled to decide her own life and life choices? Well, apparently not. But the sense of entitlement of these people is beyond extraordinary. and no consideration of other people's lives or feelings. And it is just rampant selfishness, and that alone hampers progression on a global scale. But it gets even worse though, as just a decade ago, it was common practice for K-pop agencies to ban new stars from dating, or even having a personal mobile phone. Seriously, what's wrong with people? And even to this day, admissions of romantic relationships were often considered scandalous to the fans. In Japan, many pop stars are bound by no dating clauses in their contracts, and getting married requires permission. Really? Beggars belief. There's been some debate over a political strategy in America. That is not new, but interesting that it's popping up again in the alt-media circles. And it is another of their satanic anti-people programs. And it's called the Cloward-Piven strategy, that undoubtedly came out of some clown think tank institution, and they were the guinea pigs assigned to disclose it, Cloward and Piven. But the Cloward-Piven strategy is a political strategy outlined in 1966 by American sociologists and political activists Richard Cloward and Frances Fox Piven, who was his wife. Now, Cloward was born in New York, and although his religion was not referenced, the guy attended Hebrew universities, so it seems he is another of the born in and born to brigade. His wife was born in Canada to Jewish parents. And yet again, the same links come up. Now, the strategy involved the forcing of political change to create societal collapse through orchestrated crises. Let's just repeat that again. The strategy involved the forcing of political change to societal collapse through orchestrated crises. Does anyone ask, why is that a valid thing to do to the people? And yet again, an example of zero compassion, respect or honour by these people, if that's what they really are. Now, the Cloward-Piven strategy seeks to hasten the fall of capitalism by overloading the government bureaucracy with a flood of impossible demands, amassing massive unpayable national debt, and other methods such as unfettered immigration, this pushing society into crisis and also economic collapse. And that is what has exactly played out in America. As whilst the Americans enjoyed their burgers and beers, religious gurus and cults, sports games and fake entertainment, there are snakes in the background stealing and destroying everything. So what is the history of it? Cloward and Piven were both professors at the Columbia University School of Social Work, and the strategy was outlined in a May 1966 article in the liberal magazine The Nation, titled The Weight of the Poor, weight as in terms of a measurement. A strategy to end poverty, they claimed. Yeah, right. The weight of the poor meant the burden on their shekel-based lives. To end poverty was to eliminate the people in poverty. Remember the clergy plan, and in particular the forerunner for Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, wanted to eliminate swathes of people they deemed unsuitable, particularly the poor. So the strategy was focused on forcing the Democratic Party, which in 1966 controlled the presidency and both houses of the United States Congress, to take federal action to help the poor, quote unquote. Yeah, right. And they stated that full enrolment of those eligible for welfare would produce bureaucratic disruption in welfare agencies and fiscal disruption in local and state governments that would deepen existing divisions amongst elements in the big city democratic coalition. So they were creating a bureaucratic nightmare in state and local governments and also welfare agencies. How is that helping the poor? Well, it's not. And the remaining white middle class, the working class ethnic groups, and the growing minority poor. And to avoid a further weakening of that historic coalition, they said, a national democratic administration would be constrained to advance a federal solution to poverty that would override local welfare failures, local class and racial conflicts, and local revenue dilemmas. They wrote further, the ultimate objective of this strategy is to wipe out poverty by establishing, are you waiting for it? A guaranteed annual income which will be questioned by some. Here was the precursor to the universal basic income that would be welcomed by many, but none would get the overall implications of it. Now, the implication of it is A, listen closely, you will have no rights or freedoms. None. B, you will be forced to vote, eat bugs, have jabs and any other draconian measure they deemed beneficial to them. C, there will be little to no jobs and so produce a stagnant, lazy populace rendered unable to do anything for themselves and rely solely on what they offer. D, it is an introduction to the robot and machine world. And E, most people will be eliminated under the draconian measures they will apply in so-called smart cities. Remember, smart really means to burn. And so we are back to the original meaning of Holocaust again, and the burnt offering or sacrifice. But because of the ideal of individual social and economic mobility has deep roots, even activists seem reluctant to call for national programs to eliminate poverty by the outright redistribution of income. Yes, because politicians do not operate for and by the people is why. Now, Michael Reich and Janice Andrews wrote that Cloward-Piven proposed to create a crisis in the current welfare system by exploiting the gap between welfare law and practice that would ultimately bring about its collapse and then replace it with a system of guaranteed annual income. And they hope to accomplish this end by informing the poor of their rights to welfare assistance, encouraging them to apply for benefits, and in effect overloading an already overburdened bureaucracy. In other words, they would crash the American economy, force America to borrow more funds from the Jewish Fhstos, and then pay back exorbitant interest payments that would never end the debt, only increase it to generate more shekels. But their focus was on Democrats. And the authors pinned their hopes on creating disruption within the Democratic Party, as conservative Republicans are always ready to declaim the evils of public welfare, and they would probably be the first to raise a hue and cry. All of which reveals the Democratic Party are inherently weaker than the Republican Party, and so when they are in power will be much more readily to impose draconian measures. And no, I don't favour a Republican either. I don't favour either party. They're clowns. But deeper and politically more telling conflicts would take place within the Democratic coalition. And in comes the next solution: racial division. As whites, both working class ethnic groups and many in the middle class would be aroused against the ghetto poor, while liberal groups, which until recently have been comforted by the notion that the poor are few, would probably support the movement. Group conflict, spelling political crisis for the local party apparatus, would thus become acute as welfare rolls mounted and the strains on local budgets became more severe. So what was the reception and criticism? Michael Tomasky, writing about the strategy in the 1990s and again in 2011, called it wrong-headed and self-defeating. And he wrote, it apparently didn't occur to Cloward-Piven that the system would just regard rabble-rousing black people as a phenomenon to be ignored or quashed. Clearly, Mr. Tomasky did not grasp the true level of evil behind these strategies. It was not self-defeating to those implementing it. It served a clear purpose, the destruction of America. Forget the poor, and it's just the same thing where they mention safety and security and for our benefit, when we all know it's not. We're helping the poor, says all the charities, and yet none of them do. But it served a clear purpose, the destruction of America, and yet I, a Brit, lament how too few Americans could or even can see through what's going on. Now, the impact of the strategy in papers published in 1971 and 1977, Cloward-Piven argued that mass unrest in the United States, especially between 1964 and 1969, did lead to a massive expansion of welfare rolls, though not to the guaranteed income programme that they'd hoped for. And so all those civil rights marches and riots, what the same was orchestrated. Political science Robert Albritton disagreed, writing in 1979 that the data did not support this thesis, and he offered an alternative explanation for the rise in welfare caseloads. And in his 2006 book, Winning the Race, political commentator John McWhorter attributed the rise in the welfare state after the 1960s to the Cloward-Piven strategy, but then wrote about it negatively, stating that the strategy created generations of black people for whom working for a living is an abstraction. And I agree, they have played the blacks since the two state puppets. Malcolm X and Dr. King had them all dancing with hope, which was another illusion. You can add a third to that, Obama. But notice they never mention the vast majority who are paying for these welfares. The white people, the majority. But according to the historian Robert E. Weir in 2007, although the strategy helped to boost recipient numbers between 1966 and 75, the revolution its proponents envisioned never transpired. The Cloward-Piven strategy to collapse America. And this is how it was said to unfold. Healthcare. If you control healthcare like the money, you control the people. For example, Obamacare. Poverty. Increase the poverty level as high as possible. Poor people are easier to control and will not fight back if you are providing everything for them to live. And that was the premise of the welfare or benefit system, control of the people. Debt. Increase the debt to an unsustainable level. That way you are able to increase taxes, add more inflation, and this will produce more poverty. Gun control. Remove the ability to defend themselves from the government. That way you are able to create a police state. Welfare. Take control of every aspect of their lives, like food, housing and income. The food stamps or cards only allow you to buy certain products, most of which are below standards, leading to poor health and then adding to the healthcare crisis. Education. Take control of what people read and listen to us. Take control of what children learn in school. In other words, make everyone stupid so that they don't see what they are up to. Religion. Remove the belief in God from the government and schools. And personally, I think that is a good idea. But they are planning to introduce an old but new God, Lucifer, to replace it. Class warfare. Divide the people into the wealthy and the poor. This will cause more discontent, and it will be easier to take taxes from certain types of the wealthy with the support of the poor. And most of those strategies, in case you haven't paid attention and noticed, are already done or unfolding. And it has unfolded in front of our eyes. But the problem is twofold. A, people tolerate no end of shit, and B, people are only interested in their own welfare and nobody else. But you do all realise this was another coup of America. Something the people in the government departments should have recognised and stopped. But then many of them were leveraged under the Jewish conspiracy and kept their mouths shut and actions non-existent. But America and Americans, and indeed many peoples around the world, have paid a heavy price for that inaction, allowing the juggernaut of death, harvesting and sacrificial cult to carry on and do whatever they liked. But thankfully, now that is starting to change. But we need discourse as to how the changes can be carried out, enforced in some cases, and implement a new system that benefits all of the people. The blueprint. And a topical expose this week, a bit shorter. A recent fake Oscar ceremony showered awards on the Captain Obvious movie called Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, who was Jewish and was also married to a communist, whilst also having an affair with a communist, and he took the credit for the total destruction of building the nuclear weapons that have plagued this planet and other realms, yes, correct, since the 1940s. He also worked alongside another Jewish scientist called Albert Einstein. Now, the issue upon releasing those weapons on Japan was over the radiation fallout. And lies were created and stated to President Truman, and he signed off on it. But both Oppenheimer and Einstein knew more about the radiation and just ignored it. But newly classified documents reveal that General Leslie Groves, a director of the Manhattan Project, the top secret operation that built the atomic bomb during World War II, had misled Congress and the public about the effects of radiation. Now, he did so initially out of ignorance, it is said, then denial, and finally willful deception. And the documents also show that some scientists in the project, including J. Robert Oppenheimer, who is the director of the Los Alamos lab where the bomb was first tested, kept quiet about Groves's lie rather than dispute him or confront the general directly. And the caches of documents, the latest in a series of once secret and top secret material about the A-bomb obtained over the years by the National Security Archive, who are a private research organisation at George Washington University. And so they were released recently, within days of the 78th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and in the wake of the release of Oppenheimer, which was described as the wildly and deservedly successful film that has grossed $500 million since it hit theatres within the first 3 weeks. Grossed in terms of shekels again. But everyone should be grossed out at the celebration of this movie, forgetting the damage it caused, the many deaths immediately and many more after the event, children born deformed due to the radiation poison consumed by mothers for decades later. But no, the Jewish-led Hollywood makes more shekels out of misery and suffering, and their fake stars just lapped it all up at the ceremony with not a hint of remorse or shame. None. But imagine the outrage if another movie was made in the same fashion about the Holocaust. Is it any different? Now, one of the new documents the archive obtained is a memo by 4 scientists titled Calculated Biological Effects of Atomic Explosion in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, dated September the 1st, 1945. Now, the bombs were dropped on August 6th and August 9th. But until this memo was written, it had been assumed the A-bomb's victims would be killed by its blast and its heat. But this memo concluded that at least some of the deaths had been caused by radioactive fallout days or weeks after the explosions. And yet the day before the memo's date at a press conference in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Groves said radiation had caused no deaths and that the claims to the contrary, some published in Asian newspapers, were propaganda. There's that word again. But where did that word originate from? Propaganda. And it may come as not a too surprising source, but not the one who have used it the most, the CIA and the Five Eyes crew, plus Mossad and KGB. But propaganda was first used in 1718, and it meant a committee of cardinals in charge of foreign missions of the Catholic Church. And yet again, another negative word comes from that church, something we have covered many times in earlier pieces, and also from his story to our story. But it was short for Congregatio de Propaganda Fide, a congregation for propagating the faith. Well, faith means knowledge, as we know. A committee of cardinals established in 1622 by Gregory XV to supervise foreign missions. So what were foreign missions? Well, they were meant to subvert the local populace into Christianity, often by violence and force. Now, the word is properly the ablative feminine gerundive of the Latin word propagare, to set forward, extend, spread, increase. Hence, any movement or organisation to propagate some practice or ideology, 1790. Now, the modern political sense, the dissemination of information intended to promote a political point of view, dates from World War I, not originally pejorative and implying bias or deliberate misleading. But the meaning from 1929 and more familiar to us was material or information propagated to advance a cause, etc. Now, in a memo to Oppenheimer, George Kistiakowsky, who was a Ukrainian, the Los Alamos scientist who coordinated the biological report, said that Groves had stuck his neck out by a mile. Perhaps he was a lizard. And so he hesitated to pass the study along. And even by then, enough was known about radiation poisoning to have made Groves stop short of dismissing the claims so strongly. Now, the archives documents show that back in April, 3 months before the first test of the bomb in New Mexico, medical experts from the Manhattan Project warned of a toxic cloud that could spew radioactive dust over a wide radius for hours after the detonation. This next portion should make you all vomit. But some urged Groves to evacuate the area around the test site, which he resisted. Why? Because he was not wanting to attract media attention. All of which means he knew there would be an issue and put American soldiers and people in harm's way. And yet again, Congress were not properly doing their job and investigating the military and Pentagon's methods too much, something that many people paid with their lives for. Now, one scientist remembered years later that Groves sniffed at the warning and said, "What's the matter with you? Are you a Hearst propagandist?" Now, Hearst was the leading newspaper chain of the day, often specialising, it says, in sensational reports. Just like CNN then. Now, on July 21st, 5 days after the first test, Stafford Warren, the Manhattan Project's chief medical officer, wrote to Groves that the dust outfall from the various portions of the cloud was potentially a very serious hazard over a band almost 30 miles wide, extending almost 90 miles northeast of the site, adding that there was still a tremendous amount of radioactive dust that was floating in the air. And so the residents, 30 to 90 miles away from Los Alamos, were put in danger by their own military. But it gets worse, as recent studies based on computer modelling suggest that radioactivity from the first atomic test spread much farther, affecting 46 states and also parts of Mexico and Canada. Oops. And yet Groves ignored Warren's findings. On July 30th, in a memo on the likely effects of an atom bomb dropped on Japan, he wrote General George Marshall, the US Army Chief of Staff, and said no damaging effects are anticipated on the ground from radioactive materials. And this was a deceptively written sentence. At the time, few thought much fallout would linger on the ground. But it was also widely known that it could rain down from the sky and scatter across the air, which humans could breathe or soak in. And Groves' awareness of this danger is clear in an August 25th excerpt from his diary, in which he wants to know if it is safe to invite the press to come survey the test site. And this was more than 2 months after the first test. But one of the scientists told him that it wouldn't be so safe if the journalist stood as close as 100 feet from where the bomb had gone off. Seriously, within 100 feet. Are these people that stupid or just sadistic comedians? If you were standing within 100 feet, or even 100 yards, you would get blasted to smithereens. The shock wave alone is a minimum of 3.7 miles, with wind speeds that are around 250 miles an hour, which is beyond category 5 of a hurricane, if I remember that correctly. But the reporters did come on September the 11th and were given white booties to protect them from possible radiation. The infamous September the 11th ritual sacrifice day again. But is it possible that, even at this point, Groves simply didn't believe the worst about radiation? No, he was told to keep quiet by the higher-ups, running things out of sight. But on the same day as his diary entry about inviting reporters, he had a phone conversation with a fellow officer at Oak Ridge about Japanese radio broadcasts reporting cases of radiation sickness. And Groves said this was all propaganda, and that the sickness was more likely caused by good thermal burns, he said. Good thermal burns. What a non-compassionate statement that was. And these people are clearly selected for these positions with little to no humanity and bundles of utter evil. But still, Groves then sent a team of inspectors to the two bombed cities to determine the impact of radioactivity, and he wrote General Marshall that casualties from radiation were unlikely, but the facts had to be established. Now, before the bombs were dropped, most scientists assumed that blast and heat would be the dominant effects. Radiation would be a footnote, and anyone who received a lethal dose of radiation would be close enough to the explosion to die from the blast or the heat. However, as later discovered, the A-bomb's secondary effects of radiation, smoke, fire in particular, could under certain circumstances spread even farther than the effects of the blast and the heat. Could, under certain circumstances, could. Where is the exercising of caution? And given the results coming in from Japan, why would these people put Americans at risk over a month later with a test bomb? Now, as early as the first inspector's report, the one that Kistiakowski at first withheld from Groves but eventually passed along to him, there was a notation of freak survivors within the blast radius who later died of radiation sickness. On November 27th, months after the memo about the biological effects of the atomic explosions in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Stafford Warren, the project's chief medical officer, wrote to Groves with even more definitive proof. Of the roughly 4,000 patients admitted to hospitals in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he wrote, 1,300 or 33% showed effects of radiation, and of this number, approximately one half died. And yet, nonetheless, just 3 days later, in testimony before the Senate Special Committee on Atomic Energy, Groves was asked if there was any radioactive residue at the two bombed Japanese cities. He replied, "There is none. That is a very positive none." He then further claimed that no one in the two cities suffered radiation injury, accepting at the time that the bomb actually went off. He added that it really would take an accident for the average person within the range of the bomb to be killed by radioactive effects. Really. And finally, in a comment that sealed his reputation among his critics, Groves said that irradiated victims who died not right away, but after some time, would do so without undue suffering. In fact, he said, they say it is a very pleasant way to die. Really. The total lack of compassion is just astounding. A very pleasant way to die. I'm sure those people would have preferred not to die at all, but the psychotic nature of these groups over time has shown just how much they lack in the humanity scale. And the scary thing is, 80 years on, and those same departments and their thinking are no different. Still psychotic, still no value of human life, and still lying to the American public as to their true purpose. Now, Groves discounted, downplayed, then denied the reports about radiation sickness because he said, like many at the time, he thought that nuclear weapons would be the centrepiece of US defence policy, as indeed they were for the next few decades, and that the American public would rebel against them if they were seen as something like poison gas and thus beyond a moral threshold. And so the US military were lying back then to the American public that they are supposed to serve. And by this time, Oppenheimer had recently departed from Los Alamos, but he remained on government advisory boards. Yes, like cockroaches, they scatter when the light is shone upon them. And like many scientists, he underestimated the effects of radiation, but he was now well aware of the inspector's studies and of Groves's false comments. And yet he was heralded as the father of the atom bomb, when he felt blood on his hands, as he famously confessed to President Truman later. But it was too late. But you see how Groves was set up to answer and take the heat, and yet Oppenheimer was praised as some sort of god for taking part in the same heinous actions. He said nothing about Groves' lies, at least not in public, But thankfully some were not so silent, as on December the 6th, 1945, 1 week after Groves' testimony, Philip Morrison, who was a Manhattan Project scientist who was on the team that surveyed the bomb's damage in Japan, testified before the same committee, citing the facts about radiation, directly contradicting Groves' blithe assurances. Now, Morrison went on to become a professor of physics at MIT and also an activist in the community of scientists, and many of them veterans of the Manhattan Project who advocated nuclear arms control and also disarmament. Maybe someday someone will make a movie about him. I doubt it, as these psychopaths only celebrate their own immoral kind. But Groves was the fall out guy, as shall we say, as there were many Jews running this program of mass destruction that have clearly gone under the radar. 3/4 of the lead figures around Oppenheimer in the Manhattan Project were all Jewish. That is an undeniable fact. Long before the West, who are Jewish elites, gave them a fake country. And the biggest problem with this and many other of these types of exposés is the complete lack of oversight. The military, the agencies and the Jewish all seem to have full control of this country, and no one or not enough people question it. But the ignorance of the American people, or any people for that matter, to go and watch that movie says a lot as well. It is celebrating death and suffering. Where is the thinking behind that? And what is worse is giving money to the same shekel people who created this monstrosity. We have to learn to think different. Right, our third long piece on the trot, and I've put it in the From His Story to Our Story section, but it could have gone in the news or the mystery or the Blueprint show. The message that Vladimir Putin announced on the 29th of February was the 29th in the history of modern Russia. And Putin's speech lasted just over 2 hours and 6 minutes, which was a record. And this speech was extremely positive, and many of you will notice links to our blueprint solutions. And the key point of the address was that the head of state announced a number of new national projects designed to sharply raise the standard of living in the country. And in my opinion, Putin's current address is a message to the future. He said, the future of the Russian state, the future of our economy, and this in turn is closely linked to the future of every Russian family. The head of state proposed to extend a whole range of important social programs for the people. For the first time, I proposed large-scale transformations in the country's infrastructure, a renewal of aircraft fleet, construction of high-speed highways, etc., as well as a serious increase in social benefits and the minimum wage. The so-called West, with its colonial habits, seeks not only to impede our development, but also to undermine it. Instead of empowering Russia, they aim for a state that is dependent, declining and dying. Their intention is to sow discord within our nation and weaken us internally. However, they have underestimated the resolute stance of our diverse population, Representatives from various ethnicities, cultures and regions have demonstrated through practical actions that the unity of the Russian people is an unstoppable force. Our armed forces have amassed significant combat experience. A plethora of talented young commanders have risen through the ranks, spanning all levels from platoon to top leadership. The combat capabilities of our armed forces have multiplied several times, with our units confidently seizing the initiative. While we did not initiate this conflict in Donbass, Ukraine, we are committed to ending it, eradicating Nazism and accomplishing the objectives of the special operation. The West has instigated conflicts in the Ukraine, the Middle East and other regions worldwide. Now it alleges that Russia is poised to attack Europe, a claim we all know is nonsensical. Remember, they made the same claims about Germany attacking Austria and Czechoslovakia in the late 1930s, which has turned out to be a complete and utter lie. It was the same agitators then as now, the Jews. Then it was the Jewish banksters, Warburgs, Rothschilds, etc., Morgan Chase and many others, now similar, plus the overreaching tentacles of the Jewish junta and their puppet Zelensky. Putin said they seek out areas where they believe they can defeat us most effectively within our own territory. However, we remember the misfortunes that befell those who attempted to harm us in the past. Interesting line that. Russophobia, like any ideology of hatred and racism, invariably blinds and deprives individuals of reason. The actions of the United States, notice he said the United States and not America, there is a difference, have indeed contributed to the dismantling of the international security system, creating a highly perilous situation. He said a new security system in Euro-Asia needs to be established. We are prepared to engage in discussions with all interested parties. However, I must reiterate, without a sovereign and robust Russia, security cannot be ensured. Now this runs along the line of our military solution of a collective of each country involved equally with each other, all pulling in the same direction. And to do that, all the old systems need to be dismantled, retrained and put on a path of not only Eurasia, but globally to the betterment of the all. He then said we aim to consolidate the efforts of the global majority in addressing global challenges. By 2028, BRICS countries are projected to account for approximately 37% of global GDP, while the G7 will decline to below 28%. This is an undeniable objective reality. It will remain so regardless of global events, including those in Ukraine. This was warned of by me when I was in Cosmic Voice, and was reiterated heavily when I was with the trustee and THI. So this is an added to the transcript. The move was to move all the elites and shekel makers over to China and India, hence the BRICS. But the only problem with BRICS was it was set up by the Rothschilds and Rockefeller groups, and so new boss same as the old one. But you notice the rise in their global GDP, now 37% in the next few years, whilst the G7, which is traditionally the European countries, will go below 28%, which is crashing the economies of those countries, including America, Britain, France, Germany, etc. Are you seeing the pattern now? So the BRICS top order has to be stripped away and new people inserted that are not affiliated with any of the old organisations. Now, this next section is extraordinary and has very THI and from his story to our story, part 9 flavouring. He said the primary goal of the family is to bring forth children, perpetuate the human race, raise offspring and ensure the continuity of our diverse population. We opt for life. Russia has historically been and continues to be a bastion of traditional values. Our decision is supported by the majority of people worldwide, including millions of citizens in Western nations. A large family with numerous children should serve as a cornerstone for the state's overall strategy. Over the next 6 years, our goal is to attain a consistent increase in the birth rate. This objective will be addressed in nearly every section of this address. There are over 2 million families in Russia with 3 or more children, and these families are a source of pride for us. From 2018 to 2022, the number of large families increased by 26.8%, which is a positive trend. And what that is revealing is, this is the increase of the white race and is being started by Russia. But other European countries are now cottoning onto the problems of having less white people as well. France for one, Britain another. Putin says a decree has been signed to establish a unified status for large families nationwide. I propose doubling the tax deduction for the second child. And regarding the maternity capital programme, its value is regularly adjusted for inflation. I suggest extending the programme until at least 2030. The average life expectancy in Russia has surpassed 73 years. By 2030, we aim to increase life expectancy to a minimum of 78 years, with the ultimate goal of reaching 80 years and beyond. This objective is the focus of the Long and Active Life project. It is crucial that the increase in life expectancy is accompanied by improved health and vitality. Additionally, I propose launching a programme focusing on maintaining the health of children, teenagers and mothers. That is a programme that recognises the value and importance of the people and should be applauded from the rooftops. But of course the harbingers of doom and death will not like it too much. But their reign is all but over now, and a new way has begun. In terms of economic growth, we have surpassed not only the leading EU countries but also the G7 states. The significant economic safety margin has played a pivotal role in this achievement. And this is despite all of the stupid sanctions the West imposed that has actually done more harm to their own alleged countries than Russia. Russia is the most self-sufficient country on the planet. They don't need as many outside imports, which often comes with strict restrictions and war machinery or agendas. And this annoys those that wish to control everything, and why they attack and denigrate Russia so much. Putin said the economy is evolving into a more intricate and technologically advanced structure, thus enhancing its sustainability. And at the core of our fundamentals lies science. Even during the most challenging periods, Russia has remained committed to addressing fundamental issues. Our domestic scientific infrastructure serves as a competitive advantage across numerous scientific domains. Now remember, a lot of the hidden papers about scientific discoveries in Russia that originated in Russia were not released in the West. Their technology is way ahead of ours. Way ahead. Not just military either. And he said, we must more than double government investment in this area. Additionally, investments from private businesses should substantially increase, at least doubling by 2030. Russia should aim to rank among the top 25 countries in industrial robot production. Engineering schools should prioritise enhancing efficiency, and I suggest expanding this programme and establishing a network of 100 such centres. Now that part of things I don't agree with in regards to robot production, due to economic instability that will cause, and also the people impact in terms of jobs, security, and also the greatest aspect, the purpose of life. Because the purpose of life is to not sit on our asses doing nothing, but to create, and the beautification of life, learning new skills, etc. And the robot world will take that type of growth away that is necessary here. Now, learning engineering skills again is a must, but not under the conditions that we have had previously, where enormous advancements can be made but are stifled by the former control structure to keep them in power and us in the dark. Additionally, he said we need to explore the utilisation of artificial intelligence and pursue the digitisation of libraries. To support these initiatives, we will allocate an additional 9 billion rubles. A fundamental requirement is that domestic businesses operate within Russian jurisdiction and refrain from withdrawing funds abroad where there is a risk of potential loss. Now, currently we are in discussions with entrepreneurs on how to assist them in repatriating their funds from overseas. And if investments are not made abroad, there will be no need for repatriation. Resources should be directed towards investment within Russia. And the strongest guarantee of asset safety is our robust sovereign nation. Now this plays into the piece we did in the blueprint about all countries becoming self-sufficient as much as possible and avoiding the dodgy and criminal trade deals of the elites, forcing countries into voting for tyranny, war and unsustainable debts. Putin added we need to build up our computing resources. By 2030, the total capacity of domestic supercomputers should be increased tenfold, which is a good move, and we are hoping we will be able to engage with the Russian people themselves much more than we've been allowed or able to. This will then ease the mistrust of the Russian people perpetrated by the Five Eyes group, Mossad, elements of the KGB, global elites, and the Jewish problem. Where the people of Russia can show the world their talents, ideas, ideologies, and not have it tainted by the aforementioned groups. And it will also expand the understanding of the different cultures and lead to growth between the people now engaging each other more freely. Putin added, efficiency gains in all areas of labour productivity are connected with digitalisation with the use of AI. We need to create a platform that will help citizens to maintain their health throughout their life and use the healthcare system. Such practices are already being implemented in the work of leading medical centres, and they need to be made widespread and accessible. And by 2030, these technologies should be introduced in all key areas. For this purpose, a new national project has been created called Data Economy, with at least 700 billion rubles. And one hopes that data economy opens up the vast knowledge many of the Russian people and some of their scholars have to the world. And this next piece is a key point and marker in understanding what is truly playing out. Putin said, I would like to highlight a particular point. I regularly meet with special military operation participants, all of whom have risen to defend their homeland. Observing these courageous individuals, some of whom are very young, fills my heart with pride. I am confident that they will neither retreat nor betray. Is that a jab at some on high positions who haven't been working for the benefit of Russia, who were working for the Zionists and the Black Sun elements? Putin then added, therefore they should assume leadership roles in mentoring the younger generations within large companies. They've taught one generation, they're now teaching a second generation. And he said they do not boast about their qualities, but it is precisely during such times they emerge as leaders. These individuals can be entrusted with the future and the well-being of Russia. And this is also speaking about the youth teaching the older generation and how everyone has to come together. And he said, in light of this, I consider an important decision starting from March 1st, 2024, and veterans of the Special Military Operation and its current members will have the opportunity to apply for participation in the new personnel program called Time of Heroes. And he said, I believe the following decision is significant. Beginning on March 1st, servicemen with higher education and managerial experience, regardless of their rank, will be eligible to participate. Government officials, regional leaders and others will serve as mentors. And we plan to expand this programme into the future. The veterans of the SMO will have the priority access to education at our top universities. Those who aspire to a military career will receive priority for promotion when enrolling in officer training courses. Good stuff. And this next line was a warning and also echoes what we have said as well. He said, you are aware that the term elite has largely lost its credibility. Those who, without contributing to society, perceive themselves as a privileged caste are certainly not the elite. The true elite consists of all those who serve Russia, workers and warriors, individuals who have demonstrated their loyalty to Russia through their actions. These are honourable people. And so, yes, it is all about the people now, not elites and entitled people. They are finished. But we have to replace them with better people, better ways, and also better ideas. Seem you have all liked the show so far. And we've still got the favourite section to come. History and the ending piece. So what do we have in store this evening? There was a meme posted on the chat this week that caused me to ponder again. Oh no, here we go again. The word Prozac. One of the most popular pharma drugs used by Americans and many others as an antidepressant. That is bizarrely also described to children as young as 8. Now, unsurprisingly, it has many side effects, including suicide. Further unsurprisingly, it is on the World Horror Organization list as an essential drug. And that is all bad enough. Well, let's all look at it in a THI word magic way and see what it brings up. Because if you read it as pro-Zac, then perhaps it is all hidden in plain sight again. Zac is a masculine name of Hebrew origin. It is the derivative of Zachariah, which means Yahweh has remembered. Pro equals for, Zac equals Yahweh equals support for Yahweh. All very telling, is it not? And remember, the RX on these drugs symbolises Ra. Here is another funny word that is used in politics. Hawk or hawkish. So with something in mind, I looked up the origin of it and it said this. Ra, the hawk-headed sovereign sun god of Egypt mythology, from Egyptian Ra Sun Day. Now I suspect it was a later version, and Thoth from the Pleiadian avian group, as Ra was more from the serpent group. But how much of politics is dictated by these gods from the past, fake gods at that, still influencing the now, with hawk or hawkish plus the ridiculous left and right wing nonsense? And one has to ask, are they or their influence running the politics or policies of world governments? Think about it. Now, the real world government are a bunch of reptilians in Canary Wharf, London. There's just not as many of them now. And the answer is yes, they are, and why we have to change it into human politics and policies. Although we will also have to change the word politics, as it means two parasites. Two parasites, two sides of the same coin, the double-headed Janus, left and right wing, it is all there hidden in plain sight again. The question is, which plane? And so instead of policies, perhaps we should change it to people sees. as maybe the people will finally see, and so we create people sees for a better world. This was written by one of the members that I'm sure will appeal to and resonate with you all. And it says, we agree with what is being said, and we are working to be this more and more every day. We have always been acutely aware that we are way showers and we are peacemakers. We are lovers of Midgard and all of her children, becoming adults, expanding out to infinite levels and places. We have withdrawn consent and cut the negative cords to those who abuse us and take for granted the beautiful gifts that abound us all. We work to expand our options and to touch as many as we are able with the loving heart energy. We build within for without. We have created miracles in our existence and seek to expand these out from our heart centres to the whole of humanity and beyond. We seek to continue to heal ourselves. We are not perfect, for we do not aspire to be. Just to be the best we are able in any given circumstances. Better every day in every way, even if it's just a bit. We work to balance ourselves and each other with kindness and love in accordance with the divine masculine and feminine. To become man and woman, not mere male and female. Some days we struggle only to succeed with work and inner guidance. Our beacons are shining for those with eyes to see. And they said, thanks again for being a powerful voice of reason that has confirmed for us in so many ways to believe in ourselves, our power, and in the goodness of others. Good stuff. This next piece, how to make life simpler for yourselves, is often asked by people, yet rarely implemented or acted upon. Why wouldn't you like your life to go simpler? Is a question all should ask themselves. And if you're not willing to make your own life simpler, then are you not residing within the lunatic asylum? And what is there not to like about a simpler life? Less drama, less chaos, less lunacy, and more time to think, act and live life in a better way. I'm tasking you all to read the lunatic asylum piece again. Find out the sections that applies to you and then work on correcting it. Because not correcting it means you are looping, repeating the same scenarios over and over again. Why would you do that to yourselves or each other? And a lot of you are dancing between the heart-based world and the mind-based world, the latter of which will often lead you astray. And the key to it is how you think. What are you thinking about? What is your focus? Where is your attention going to? As too often the case is, other people. Their problems, their anxiety, their sadness, their scatteredness and their drama. And drama has become one of the world's largest uses of energy. It has almost created its own subculture. And you wonder why soap drama shows are so popular. Because the focus is on what other people are doing, not what you're doing. And in overview, these wasted energies is an escapism method to avoid dealing with your own problems, often with devastating effects. And yet too few think of life and themselves in those terms. But can it not be seen as a lazy way to avoid dealing with your own problems? Something humanity across the board is sadly adept at. But that is a dereliction and deflection of duty to the self, and will never lead you anywhere except riding the conveyor belt like a deflated balloon. But when you develop yourself and address the inner issues, not try to fix everybody else's, including your own external issues, life becomes much simpler. And then what others do or don't is not your concern. What you do or don't is what really matters. Only you can fix you, raise you, save you, and soul develop you. But to do that, you have to find you. Have you found you yet? Think about that. Have you found you as a person? Because most haven't. Now ponder on that lunacy pattern. Raising your frequency, life becomes much simpler. Developing into the heart centre, not mind centre, life becomes much simpler. When you think, critical think, future think, and overview everything, life is simpler. And doing the above then puts you in the domain of the wise, or the wisdom realm, where life gets even more simpler. Yet why is there only a few that figured it out? Because people don't think, or think upon the wrong things. And the key to true understanding is to know, learn and grasp what is the most complex thing on this planet: man itself. Everything else is simple. But here's a pondering question for people who are selfish. That means you are more service to the self than service to others. Where most people reside, if truth be told. But if you are all about yourself and selfish, why have you avoided the self with the shadow and inner work? One of life's great mysteries, that. It's all about me for them, people taken and not given, yet they find the time to neglect the key component of service to the self. Funny that. Well, I've been pondering even more. He has too much time on his hands. Yeah, right. Following an exchange recently with a member and a question of how to help the children now. And it was in relation to what is known as the star children, or indigos in particular. How can we help them? Now, Star Children is a curious title and brings in labels of being different or special. But two things come from that. A, we are all special. And B, we are all from the stars. And C, we are made up of stardust. Some things to ponder on. But back to the issue of the Star Children or indigos. It is my understanding that starting in the late 1950s, early 1960s, a different batch of souls were coming here for a mission and a purpose. It built up each successive decade until the arrival of the children from 2000 onwards, who would have greater skills, more DNA strands, more understanding, higher frequencies, etc., to change this planet into something far better. But the clowns knew this and created ADHD around the late 1980s, early 1990s, and a series of drugs to counteract it, like Ritalin. Now, Ritalin disturbs the brain thinking neurons, and hampers the child's development to prevent them doing what they came here for. Now, the real problem for these children is they cannot handle the low-level frequency here too well when they first arrive. And adjusting to it generally takes until they reach puberty, and then they can handle or manage it better. The background noise in their ears is incessant. That resonates through their bodies is what really annoys them. So to counteract that, they are noisy, they're busy, running around at anything to drown out the noise. And often parents cannot handle them. They don't have the legendary P word, patience, to deal with this child going mad everywhere. Now, I have helped a few of these parents in my time as a show host, and the fix is all very simple. People often ask how we can help them, and the thinking is we have to do something external for them. Whether that's highlighting the issues of the children, exposing the medical and psychology industries, campaigning, writing letters, doing blogs and petitions. But remember, life is simple, and so are the solutions for it. Do you wish to know how to help all the children on this planet, particularly those wrongly bracketed with ADHD? Raise your own frequency onto the higher level. Because then you are helping every type of child on the planet if everyone adapts to doing that. As once you raise your frequency level, it affects everyone around you, not just the children. But these different children will feel the benefits instantly. How did I help those children? I just spoke to them and stood close to them. And they reacted instantly to my frequency and were miraculously calmer. Now you all have a responsibility now. You know this simple solution. Is it not time you truly did something in service to the self and benefit for others, in particular these children? Many people raising their frequencies will aid the children to get rid of their mislabeled malady and become free to fulfill their missions here. Final piece tonight. The Common Sense Zoom, taking place on March 30th, will be a one-off open Zoom that all can attend. That's a week on Saturday. Now, the details will be on thi-show.com, and I'm asking for you all to bring all your questions, concerns and worries and put them on the table, so to speak, so we can then clear the decks for the next stage. And the next stage will be very important to and for us all. Now it starts at noon Mountain Time, and remember the clocks went forward here, so that for the UK it's 6 p.m. and for the EU 7 p.m. What have we got next? Perhaps not. Okay. This coming Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and remember your clocks in Europe go forward an hour, and so we're back to normal times the following week. The long-awaited Empowerment Show will finally be delivered this next Tuesday. A further 2 parts to that show will follow in due course, and a special empowerment section will be created on the front page of thi-show.com. We're also considering pulling in the What Is series from the Blueprint shows, plus the Sigma pieces, and adding them into that section as well. Good stuff. But we have more. One of the things that may have come across in the Sigma pieces recently is the disappointment about certain aspects. And yes, I'm disappointed, but not for me, but for you. Why? Because I know what becomes of you on the other side of the illusion version of yourselves. There were talks about people being selfish and not enough service to others, and that has been evidenced. But again, I see it as people not giving themselves a chance in life, and indeed of life. And the key to it all is, and why THI really exists, is for you all to become better people. That then changes the world one person at a time. But that will take ages, Thomas, you may cry. Well, it's not just this time or lifetime correcting it, is it? But thousands of lifetimes to get it right. But the difference this lifetime is, you had a mentor of sorts to guide you through it, give you the tools to address, introduce things in bite-sized chunks, and allowed you the space to process it. Has it been difficult for you all? Absolutely, and you should all give yourselves a pat on the back for trying to embrace it. But going back to people being selfish, which is their choice to make, but there is one aspect that people who are selfish and all about themselves overly that is sadly lacking that we just referenced. If only selfish people saved themselves on shadow and inner work, imagine how much further you and we would be. And many of you in the group have had major wobbles recently and asked me to help you, which I have. But I can no longer be expected to fix all of your lives to the depths that I've had to. My time has to be more focused upon the work now, and I will need you all to step up considerably as an exciting phase is about to unfold. We have been contacted by a radio show host after he picked up one of our flyers that was recently introduced. We referenced it in the last blueprint. And further engagements with them will be forthcoming, and more details will be released. But there is more. I was contacted recently by what will remain an unknown source for now, but with certain links to very important people. We exchanged views, and it looks like we have liftoff for the blueprint, and also potentially a stream of Zooms and interviews. This is the moment that I and we have been waiting for, and it is our time now to show the world just what we are capable of. For my part, I've been prepping for this since last July, and I'm more than ready to go out into the world and showcase the blueprint and also THI. And this is the first part of the pay it forward for all our hard work has generated. I have also discussed having dual calls with some of the members and some of their representatives to get to know each other better and chart a path forward. If you think this was unexpected, think again. I warned you all in part 3 of the review of 2023. Remember, I said 2023 is the last of the normal years. Well, now you are seeing it globally. Today marks special days in our calendar, not theirs. First off, one of our members reached an important milestone he was hoping to keep quiet, and so I'm sure you will all go along with me wishing a happy birthday to Todd Heaps, who is the big 6-0 today. But there are 2 more big markers today. It was 1 year ago today we launched the current Blueprint Show 1. The first readout of the first of 3 Blueprint shows then was 1 year ago today. Today also marks the 4th anniversary of the day of the Sfarog. 2 momentous celebrations, and I hope this announcement on this day also creates the triality aspect. Enjoy the celebrations for today, but let's start the 5th year of the day of the Sfarog with a greater push from us all to get this truth and restoration train running smoothly. Let's go out and show the world a new way. Let's go out and show the world we can think and act different. Let's go out and show the world we've all stepped out of the lunacy stage. And we are ready to boldly go where man on this planet for a very long time has not shown up too well, and go on to become the I'm Possible dream. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.